Hey, my name is Greg Dixon, and today I'm going to continue my adventures in music stories. Going to Roadwork in 1978, and here's the band. I was going to Cap College at the time, taking a variety of courses, but I ended up playing in a jazz improv band with Matt Steffich, who's in the first part there, and Chris Grove. We played in the same. We played swing tunes and a variety of stuff. It was great fun. And I guess in the spring, I think it was Matt come up and said, "Well, let's put together a band, and we're going to practice, get an agent, make some money for the summer." The interesting thing is Matt had already committed to going to Toronto, I think at the end of September, so we had a finite lifespan for the band. So um, I watched Leonard Skinner documentary the other day, and one of the discussions in there is when they were in high school, the band members recruited a guitarist in there, and somebody said, "I don't care if he can play; he's got a guitar and amp, so he's in." So I think Matt and I had a conversation about inviting Chris, and he says, "Well, he plays saxophone, he can play some guitar, he plays bass, he sings a little bit." And then the deciding factor was he had a van, so it didn't matter as long as he had the van. So yeah, so that was the thing. And I would have to say this is one of the most impressive bands that I was in musically. So we had this finite time. We started at the end of May. Whenever we got out of college, we started practicing, and then when we had tunes ready to go, we called an agent. So the very first day we practiced in my mother's basement. Oh, I forgot to mention we added a fourth member, and that was Tom Hammel, and he was a friend of a friend of Matt's, and we brought him in. We really didn't know him, but he was kind of a treasure in the sense that he came equipped with knowing every single Beatles song, and knowing all of the vocal parts, all the vocal harmonies, and he could sing the high notes. He borrowed a bass to play, but he was a pretty decent bass player. He also knew every single Kiss tune. So I think we played Mama Let Him Play, or not Mama Let Him Play, Tie Your Mother Down. Um, we didn't indulge in any more Kiss tunes than that. It probably took me 20 years after that before I learned to appreciate Kiss. Anyway, but so the first day we played, the first five things we played were really stage ready. We're ready for, to play in a bar and to play, pretty presentable stuff. And that came from, for one, Chris and I had been playing together for a while. I played in Primal Scream with Chris Grove. So, but the main factor was because they were music students, they're quite literate about music and had practiced a lot and had a practice approach. So we practiced every day for at least 5 or 6 hours, and we learned about five new songs a day, and that kept on. We did that probably every day for maybe 3 weeks or a month, and we reached out to an agent to come and hear us. I think we arranged to play in some neutral location, or I can't remember if the agent came and heard us. And after that, we didn't really get a gig for a while. And then finally, I think because you're a new band and they're always reluctant to put you into a paid setting. And then we did finally get a job in a bar in Ladner. And the interesting thing about us is because we played a huge range of material, which was also true of Primal Scream. We started off with some jazzy tunes, swing tunes, then some bluesy stuff and some pop stuff. and we were in the middle of playing the pop stuff, and we played an Eddie Money tune, and two guys got up and they said, "Well, we thought you were really good until you played that Eddie Money shit," and then they left. I think they were leaving anyway, and they just wanted to take a parting pot shot. But the thing that made us uh or got us hired every time is we took Tom's knowledge of the Beatles tunes and we made one 45-minute medley. So we started playing at the beginning of the 45 minutes, and we just ran 45 minutes of Beatle tunes together. The dance floor would instantly load up, fill up, and they never left for the rest of the night, because our fourth set and fifth set were really very rocky. It got progressively louder. We were, Tie Your Mother Down was probably in the last set, and we played some Who stuff and Steppenwolf, and it was a really efficient, fun band to play. When we got playing, we ended up playing gigs, and we were playing 4 and 5 hours a day, and we showed, and we had this thing is even the last couple times when we played together, it was our thing is to go down, sit down, and learn a new song and then play it that night. So we were always adding songs, and really it was quite amazing. I think if Matt hadn't left to go to Toronto, we probably would have continued to play gigs as we worked our way through college, probably on weekends and occasionally, and we might have had a much longer career. Matt Steffich and Chris Grove certainly went on to have pretty good careers in the music industry. And Tom, I didn't really keep touch much with him until I wrote an article about photos that Ray Parker found of us playing for Dave and Marie Cottrell's party, uh, wedding reception. The wedding was actually up in Vanderhoof, and we made the local newspaper by getting involved with a big brouhaha bar band bar brawl in in Burns Lake, or where was it? Vanderhoof, I guess it was. Yeah, but anyway, that's another story. While we're here, I might as well show you the photos. Um, so that's me and my drums. Um, I played. Uh, that's the famous teal drum kit. I bought a Premier kit and I bought in 1974, and I still have it, still hanging out at Harry Bullion's house. And there's Dave and Marie Cottrell. They're high school sweethearts. They got married, still together. There we go. There's Chris, um, Tom, myself, the back, and Matt Steffich. And I think one of the things really I was mentioning that Chris Grove is uh, Matt was a very fine lead guitarist, and really sang very well. And but Chris with his saxophone, and he's got a Gibson SG, and he could sing. He had a bit of a growly voice, so he really was able to allow us to play like Steppenwolf and those grungy tunes. He really added it, and the saxophone gave us a lot of diversity. There he is, the B flat saxophone, Chris would call it. And there's Dave being very flamboyant, and Tom looking very serious there in the middle. And more dancing. Oh, there's Greg Richmond. I mentioned him previously. He was, if you can imagine him jumping up and down on some chair, yelling expletives at Brian and Brian and Allison's wedding. So, oh, there you go. Ooh, that's a good photo of the two of them. And there, me again. All right. So one of the All the bands had a lot of adventures, and one of the gigs we got was in a little town. Wasn't even a town; it's a place called Bralorn. It used to be a mining town and had a population of probably a few thousand people in its heyday, and it's been shut down, and it has maybe a population of about 40. So we got hired to play for a dance there with about 500 people, and because it turns out that it was a thing that people, they'd rent the hall. There's a big hall there. They'd rent the hall and invite everybody who's ever had anything to do with Braylon to come to this big dance. And so we went. And um, as I mentioned before, Chris had a handy van, and so we had all of our gear loaded up into it. And Greg Richmond and Steve Meester and Dave Cottrell came along, and also Janet Mitchell was staying with me at the time. Um, there's a whole story about Janet, but anyway, the night before, we had, I guess, had a bit of a party at our house and drank too much, and Steve was a little bit hungover. So we were driving along sort of the Duffy Lake Road and had a flat tire in on the van. So we stopped. Meanwhile, Dave and Greg ran off into the up into the hills. I don't know what they were doing. And anyway, um, by the time they're ready, Chris and company were ready to go in the van. These guys were nobody to be seen, nowhere to be seen. So I jumped in the van and went. Janet and I jumped in the van, squeezed in the van, and we went up to Bralorn. And we got to Bralorn. There's kind of a fork in the road, and you could either go straight ahead to, I think it was Gun Lake, or you can go left up into the town of Bralorn. It's a little ambiguous, but we got up to the hall. We set everything up, had everything ready to go, and anyway, Dave and Steve and Greg were nowhere to be found. And we, I think we're at 9 o'clock. We're about to start playing, and then Dave comes up, and Dave Dave looked a little scruffy all the time, but even he looked even scruffier than normal, and he had this big Canada Post canvas bag full of dented beer cans. There was a beer strike on, and somehow we got a hold of about, I don't know, 4 or 5 dozen US beers, cans, cases of beer. Anyway, so anyway, he's just laughing. I could hardly get the story out of him. And anyway, apparently they ran off the road, and so they had stopped at that junction there, and there were two guys hitchhiking. And so the two guys in the hitchhiking, and they jumped in the back of the car, and they started going. They said, "Which way to the dance?" And the two guys indicated going down the branch to the right. And Steve thought that was not quite right, because I think he had a sense that we should have turned left there. They went about 200 feet, and Steve turned to ask them a question about it, but he got too close to the edge of the road. And so, Dave, being crazy, he didn't panic. He just counted how many times the car flipped. So there happened to be Stephen made a fiberglass kayak, which was on the roof. And anyway, the car started flipping, and Dave said it went 5 times. It flipped sideways 5 times, landed upside down. Um, uh, and there was a big tree, and if it hadn't hit the tree, it would have gone into the water, and possibly everybody would have been killed. Anyway, nobody was hurt. um, Dave and Greg thought this was really funny. There was beer cans, beer stuff, and a bunch of Janet's stuff flying everywhere, all over the place. Anyway, the two hitchhikers who got in the car for 100 feet and then ran off the edge of the road were not very happy. Anyway, they worked their way up to the top of the hill, and with some kind of miracle, the kayak popped off the roof and was barely damaged. I think it had a little crack in it. So they dragged it up and put it somewhere close to the road, and then they went off, and then they eventually got to the to the gig. And so we started playing, and the organizers thought we were too loud, and we were kept on putting it quiet as we could go. But it was just, anyway, as people started drinking more, it got louder and louder, and eventually the organizers just left. And of all things, that there happened to be another dance, like where the confusion came naturally, because there was another dance with about 500 people down the road. And it turned out that many of our high school friends were there. I think Steve Campbell and Laurel Bowl and a number of other people. So they end up showing up at this dance. And I don't know, Bonnie, Laurel may not be happy with this story, but she said she was traumatized because her dad and his new wife showed up there, and she has an image of the woman's bathroom was completely overloaded and full. And anyway, the woman was squatting in the sink. So Laurel's needed therapy ever since. So that was that was one thing. At the end of the gig, so the band, we didn't really have a place to stay, but there were a bunch of sort of abandoned bunkhouses. And so I think Janet and I were in one bed, and Chris Grove woke up, and Chris Grove was lying on the floor with a towel over him. And I went outside, and there's Dave and Greg and Steve Meester, and they had this blanket and sleeping bags out on the ground, but they had like tons of turkey and hamburgers and wine and beer. And I guess they found some kind of party, and when they left, they pillaged and took everything with them. They had the spoils, like Vikings, really. So that that was uh, a bit bizarre. And anyway, so that was that part. And then we continued on to go to, after this gig, we had a gig to play for, I think it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks, in Lillooet, which is a little town. And this was in the summer, really hot. And a place called the Totem Cafe. It probably doesn't exist anywhere, or Totem Cabaret, kind of a small place that had a stage and I don't know, a couple hundred seats or something. And when we got there, the organizers, or the owners of the cabaret, were not there. They were at a local rodeo. They had a little food truck or something that they were serving stuff at the rodeo. So um, we there was a guy at the hotel next to, a native guy sitting there, and we asked him, says, well, where's a good place for us to stay or camp? And he says he likes to take his girlfriends to the graveyard, to the cemetery, because it's nice and quiet there. And so anyway, um I guess Matt and I went, and maybe Dave, Greg or something, we went and we did go sleep. We slept in the cemetery, but at about midnight, I guess the owners of the cabaret got in and let the other guys into the room, and they found a bunch of German uniforms in the closet, so they couldn't resist dressing up and coming out and goose stepping over the cemetery, in through the cemetery. It's just, so I don't know. We were young and silly. So that gig was really pretty amazing. There are some recordings floating around there. Matt Steffich sort of hung a ghetto blaster above the dance floor and recorded quite a few sessions, and pretty good stuff. Again, we learned a new tune and played it every night. And yeah, it was really quite an adventure. And I have I don't know, maybe I should tell the story right now. Why not? Okay. So it turns out that, when you're in a little town, is you tend to hang out um, with the band, or exotic dancers. And at this cabaret, we played sort of Monday to Saturday. I think we had like 6 nights, and we got paid, I don't know, $300 a week for the band or something. And they had dancers in, I think it was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. And the dancers made more money than the entire band complete. And there were a lot of pretty good dancers came because we were there long enough to rotate through a few dancers, and one of the dancers was named Cindy, and she had long brunette hair, sort of wavy hair that sort of just cascaded over her breasts, and um, she said she was 19. Uh, Matt thought maybe she was not quite 19, but she was just the sweetest and most beautiful person I think we ever met, and everybody fell in love with her. And I think Chris was dating her a bit. Like he was very seriously interested in her. And anyway, the gig finished. We ended up going home, and I guess I had Cindy's phone number. She contacted me and phoned it, and anyway, so she's uh, dancing at the Drake. The Drake is a sort of downtown bar in Vancouver, a little bit edgy, but one of the best places for dancers because it was big and they had lots of dancers. Anyway, she met me out in the parking lot and she came and gave me a big hug and a kiss. And and it turned out that there were two guys there from Lillooet. I think they were um, were working as firefighters there. They're at a fire station, and they were in the bar pretty much every night. And I guess one of these guys absolutely fell in love with Cindy, and I think he wanted to marry her. And I'm not sure what happened there, but I got the sense that they weren't happy to see me. And anyway, I went in and had some beers and watched the dancers, watched Cindy dance, and I went to go home. And I had a 1964 MGB at the time, and it was rust colored with white highlights. I knew the rust was honest. I closed the door one day and back quarter panel fell off. But anyway, I was out there about to get in the car, and this young woman comes and she asks if she can have a ride. So I said, yeah, sure, okay. So I said, I'll give you a ride. And anyway, we're driving down the road and she's looking at me and she's making some seductive comments about the way I looked and wanted to see me without my glasses. And anyway, I'm just totally oblivious to the whole thing. And I finally says, well, where do you want to go? Where can I drop you off? And then she says, oh, you're so sweet. And she says, leans over and gives me a sort of kiss and said, oh, you can let me off here. So, yeah, so anyway, a lady of the night, which I just totally oblivious of. So yeah, anyway, so that was adventures uh in Lillooet, and we ended up going back for another stint because, as I mentioned before, every place we ever played invited us back on the just because once we started playing the Beatles stuff, the whole floor filled up and then never left. And we played some interesting things. There are a couple of things that were um, interesting and challenging for us. We did Jerry Doucette's "Mama Let Him Play." We also did some Southern rock tunes. We did "I Know a Little" by Leonard Skinner, and "The Devil Went Down to Georgia," I think it was. And another challenge tune for us was "Reeling in the Years." So it was there were almost everything else we played pretty easily. There were a couple of tunes that we had to really be on our toes because they can go wrong. And actually watching that little spiel on Leonard Skinner is that they had really precise three-part guitar parts and really tight stuff with the drummer. And they had, when the drummer went crazy, they brought another drummer in, and he had a hard time with the parts. And you can see it's incredible precision in that whole thing. And we did Allman Brothers the whipping post, which is in a different time signature. So we had some pretty good adventures, and that band was fabulous. And I did a few things with some of the other members separately in later years, but that was sort of, in some ways, that was my golden age of professional drumming. After that, most of the projects were kind of amateur jobs. Blazing Saddles has got to a pretty good level. Um, and but I was doing other things, going to college, going to university, got married, all that kind of thing. But road work was pretty good. Anyway, I think that's all I'm going to tell for now, and talk to you later.